Hey everyone, it's Ben Cicchini, founder of Give and Grow, back with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. This is our social emotional learning series, and I'm super excited today to introduce you guys to Fabian Dixon. Fabian is coming to us from Silver Spring, Maryland, by way of Atlanta, Georgia, with his master's in school counseling and currently being a school counselor in Montgomery County public schools out there in Maryland. So happy to have you on the show today, Fabian. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. Excited to have this conversation. And for the people that are just tuning into the podcast for the first time, this is where we dive deeper into social emotional learning skills, mental health skills, and conversations to support teachers, parents, coaches, even that are looking to just raise healthy, loving kids, right? And these skills are things that I've done a lot of research on. I know Fabian being in the school counseling world, like this is what we're passionate about. So we're here to share some of those things with you guys today. So Fabian, can you just start off by explaining, like, in your own words, what social emotional learning is and why it's so important for kids?
Of course. So when I look at social and emotional, I look at the two key aspects. Social, how do kids, interact with others, those basic social skills. Emotional, how they manage their emotion. So I look at the process of self-awareness. Self-awareness means understanding your emotions, understanding others around you. Then you have that self-control. I work with students grade K through second, understanding those emotions. All emotions are okay. Having those self-control components or the impulsivity, just having that self-control, around others of, taking deep breaths. And then I also look at the interpersonal skills. So what that means to me is like how you communicate, those skills, show empathy to others. It's the social interaction. So when I look at social emotional, it's those two key components, the social aspects, understanding the social skills, key components, and then you have emotional, understanding how to manage your emotions, when
Mhm.
something makes you upset. I always tell my students that, all emotions are okay. Even
Mhm.
adults go through emotions, but what are those skills that we use to help us self-regulate?
Yeah, that's huge. That's something that we dive into a lot with our organization. And I think it's just that basic thing, but something that we can continue to reiterate with our kids that whatever you're feeling is okay. Even if you're feeling
Yes.
angry, if you're feeling lonely, even those uncomfortable, the most uncomfortable emotions, grief, sadness, like it's still okay to feel those things. And can we have these skills, as you mentioned, to work through it? Um, what are some of those skills that you like to, share with your kids? And are you specifically working with K to 2, or are you in an elementary school setting where it's all the way up to like 4th, 5th?
I'm in an elementary setting, K through two. Our school is like very unique. So it's lower elementary. So
Got you.
we're not a school that has K through five. So when our
Awesome.
kids leave second grade, they go to neighborhood schools. They go to, different schools, then they meet back up in middle school.
Got you.
So
Got
yes,
you.
so the schools they'll go to will have third, fourth, and fifth. And then
Okay.
they won't see each other again until middle school, and then they finish off at high school.
Got you.
Yeah, so how to weigh it? Go
With
ahead.
that, sorry to interrupt, just with that K to 2 like age group, like what are those basic things that you're starting to introduce to them at, 5, 6 years old, all the way up to like, what is that, 7, 8?
Five, yeah, seven, eight. Yes. Yeah, and sometimes we have pre-K as well. And so, I make sure it's age appropriate, the language that they can understand. Because what I may teach to a K through second, I wouldn't teach to third, fourth, and fifth because of the
Right.
vocabulary of the language. So you
Hmm.
want to make it simple as possible, meet them on their level. So,
Hmm.
using simple vocabulary, not the complex vocabulary.
Hmm.
I like to use a lot of pictures with the students,
Okay.
point out how you feel. Oh, I understand you feel this way. And when the students get to second, I may like, up it a little notch with the vocabulary, but not too much. Because with,
Hmm.
second graders, I kind of use a lot of conflict resolution with them,
Hmm.
teamwork, because, at their age, they're starting to understand a little that,
Hmm.
okay, we're gonna have disagreement with friends. Okay, my emotions may get to, elevated high, but that's okay. I could go see Mr. Dixon. He could give me some tools to help me self-regulate. I
Hmm.
like to use coping strategies. I call them toolbox. And when the
Hmm.
kids ask me, what's the toolbox? I'm like, toolbox that you have with certain strategies that you can use. Do you have to use deep breathing? No. Deep breathing may not work for you. It may work for
Hmm.
someone else. You do something that helps you self-regulate. breathe in, breathe out, exercising, tree
Hmm.
pose. I know one of my students love doing the tree pose when
Okay.
he gets very anxious. I'm like, tree pose, and just hold his legs up. A lot of them
Nice.
like to do kinetic sand, the grounding technique. So what is
Mm,
the grounding technique? The five senses. What do I see? I may see water if I'm at the beach. That helps me
mhm,
self-regulate. What I'm touching, something fidgety or
mhm,
kinetic sand. What do I smell? I may smell something that my mom's cooking at home, like meatballs,
mhm,
spaghetti, Italian food. What do you
mhm,
hear? The ocean waves can help you, like, calm and
mhm,
relax.
mhm,
So the grounding, five senses. What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste?
mhm,
No, ice cream. So I use a lot of grounding. I use a lot
mhm.
of, coping strategies slash toolbox with the students. I know most of my students like calling it coping strategies, and I have some like calling it toolbox and the zones of regulation as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. I really appreciate like when people come on to the show and they talk about like the specific skills because it's like kinetic sand. You threw out something. I think I know what you're talking about, but can you break down kinetic sand just for me and anybody else who might not
Sure.
understand?
Kinetic sand is like that texture is sand, but it feel like it's not Play-Doh. It's just sand that, a lot of my students like picking up and they just go through their hands. It's this
Hmm.
very soft texture.
Gotcha.
I had a student that was very dysregulated today.
Hmm.
And I'm like, hey, would you like to play with kinetic sand? Yes. So I set the timer for 6 minutes. He was making things out of the sand, picking up the sand, and the sand just going right through his hands. It's a soft texture that, helps some self-regulate when they may be
Hmm.
dysregulated. So
Yeah.
when they're dysregulated, they just emotions everywhere. They're not hearing what you're trying to say. And I tell the student, that's fine. When you're
Hmm.
ready to talk, there's no rush. I'm validating your feelings, validating
Hmm.
your emotion. You have every right to feel that way.
Hmm.
All our emotions are valid. How can I help you navigate through this?
Right. Right. And what I'm hearing in that is the answer to that, like patience and meeting them where they're at, right? Like they might not be ready. I feel like we can get in a space, whether it's with a young kid or somebody older, as a parent, as a teacher, as a coach, even of just like wanting to get on to the next thing, right? We had this agenda for our class, we had this agenda for our day as a family or for the practice as a coach. And it's like, but emotions might come up and they might need to put a pause on that. And so I appreciate you offering that to your kids in that space of like, okay, you're not ready. Let's come back in 6 minutes after you've had a chance to play with the sand and regulate yourself and now have this conversation. And it can be really challenging to do that. What do you think like gives you that ability to kind of slow down and just go with where they're at, be patient?
I think it's sometimes your approach. Your approach is, the number one key factor. If the students look at you and see, okay, he's very approachable, building that rapport, getting to know your students is a key factor in becoming a school counselor or being a school counselor, and just listening, a
Mm-hmm.
listening ear. And
Mm-hmm.
just being patient and understanding and meeting them on their level. If they sitting on the carpet in my office, I sit on the carpet with them. Or if they sitting on the chair, I sit at the chair. So I always want to make the students feel comfortable when they come in my office. I always tell them this is a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, you talk about stays in here. It's all about, patience, tone is a key
Mm-hmm.
factor. If
Mm-hmm.
they hear your tone, they know that, okay, they'll open up more and they're like, okay, I'm building rapport with my counselor and you building rapport with that student as a school
Mm-hmm.
counselor. So those are key factors to me when getting to know your student, the tone of your voice, building the rapport
Mm-hmm.
and meeting them where they are and just
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
Sometimes students just want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, sometimes students just want you to hear what they're saying, just
Right.
listening.
Right. Yeah. And I can see that just being that is a huge support. Just being able, we don't need to tell them exactly what to do. Just listen in. Just
Yes.
listen in. Let them flow. With you working with that younger age group of kids, I'm curious to know like what are some of those early signs that a kid might be struggling with some of these skills or struggling to cope or manage their emotions?
That's a good question there because, I see it a lot because, sometimes I have a lot of parents reach out to me or, they seeing things at, home when it comes to their behavior at home can lead over to school, or sometimes the teachers reaching out to the parents and the parents reaching out to me. Because one key factor when it comes to, kids not understanding their emotion, mostly parents see the behavior, but when I talk to parents, I tell the parents, whatever behavior they're, you know, doing or simplifying, just, talk with them about it. Like, if they're showing the anger, sit down with them because, I always tell parents, at this age, they're still developing, they're still
Hmm.
understanding what
Yep.
are emotions, how to cope with those emotions, identify those emotions, get something
Hmm.
age appropriate. Because I do a lot of individual strategy counseling with certain students, which is short term, and I do a lot of activities, and I always email parents on what the topic may be about. I do from
Hmm.
little spots of emotions or, understanding emotion, coping strategies, and identifying our emotions, something they could take home so parents will also reiterate with them at home as well.
Hmm.
So, parents, when it comes to the parents at home, working with them, just identify their emotion, give them space,
Hmm.
validate their emotions,
Hmm.
understanding how they may feel.
Hmm.
Just I tell a lot of parents, just don't, why you doing this? Why you doing that? Just let them deep breathe. And then when
Hmm.
they're ready to talk, they'll let their feelings out.
Yeah, I feel like as you're sharing that, what you shared earlier is coming back to mind, like of creating that space, safe space, right? Like that. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Get in the car, go to your room. Like it's not getting to the root cause of that behavior. That behavior is happening because there's like a need that's not being met, or there's some challenge that the kid is facing, right? And rather than
Right,
punishing them, can we get to the core of that? And I love that how you're throwing out just like meet them where they're at, be a safe space, listen.
right.
Those are all tools to be able to get to what is really going on for you right now.
Right. Because a lot of it may be, social interaction with others at school, or sometimes not knowing the foundational skills of, what it is to become building friendships or understanding, respecting other boundaries or understanding
Mhm.
their emotions. So all that plays a factor, especially for a kindergarten coming into the public school setting,
Mhm.
not knowing those key components, not knowing the foundational skills, not knowing the social skills, not knowing the mannerism. So
Mhm.
that's where, I kind of come in, to teach certain foundational skills. And then, parents could also reiterate at home because, it takes a village to raise a kid.
Facts. Yeah. And so like when a parent's at home, that was another question that I wanted to ask you, just like around like how parents can support their kids in building healthy relationships. And those gotta be super pivotal years, that K to 2, age group. Can you just talk about like specifically like what they could do at home with their kid to like help them prepare or work through some of those social challenges or growth opportunities?
Sure. When they see certain behaviors with their child or student, explain their emotion. Ask them, hey, I see that you feel this way. Keep it age appropriate, different activities, use simple terminology, not complex terminology to, especially with a kid through K through second,
Hmm.
give them that space and give them that time that,
Hmm.
hey, 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes. I understand that you need your space. I'll come back and, we can talk,
Hmm.
talk about the coping strategies that you can use, talk about the grounding exercise or social stories help as well, to help them emotional regulate. Read certain social stories. I always tell the parents that, I have a website, go to the school website, counselor corners have different resources.
Hmm.
Click on stories that you could listen to with your child. Just different
Got
activities to
you.
help them manage those emotions, to help them navigate through certain situations. Once they go through kindergarten first, second, and on up to, high school, they have those certain strategies or tools to use.
Yep, right, right. Can you talk a little bit more about like the social stories and was it counseling corner? Can you just talk about like what are social stories? Like I think I got an idea, but yeah, I just
Sure.
want to know for sure.
Social stories are stories that, kids may be having a hard time navigating through certain, situation at school. It may be building friendships. You could read a story with friendships or whole
Gotcha.
body listening.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I had to read a story to a student one day about whole body listening, how we should sit on the carpet, how when a teacher is teaching, what should you do? Raise your hand, or
Mm-hmm.
should we shout out? Or,
Right.
another one, how we should walk in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Those good social skills, those mannerism, being respectful of others' boundaries, or,
Mm-hmm.
respecting others, showing empathy, to how others may feel by wearing their shoes, or perspective taking, or
Right.
different other skills that, that help students build those foundational skills to help them be successful in school when it comes to academic and having those foundational skills to be
Right.
successful.
Right. And it sounds like that's a fun, engaging way to do it with your kid through stories, right? And it's obvious, but like to know that there's stories that specifically teach like whole body listening or developing friendships or, developing empathy, like whatever it is, like there are stories that can really teach that. And what I mean, yeah, we can throw our kid on an iPad, but we can also engage them in these type of stories where they're actually learning skills, right? And I think that's a really valuable use of time and a great way to connect with your kid too in a fun way, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any other like effective ways that you feel like teachers or parents can help teach kids about emotional regulation, like maybe even specifically calming down when they're upset?
I would say that, because I know at school, because I have a lot of parents that say, oh, they do this at home. I'm like, I don't see this at school because, they with me for 8 hours of the day. Then, once they leave school, they're ready to, kind of turn up
Right,
at
right,
home.
right.
And so, I always tell parents, I understand that, there's two different kids. One at
Mhm.
school, get the studious student. Then at home, you get the rambunctious student. So I
Right.
always tell them, just be patient, just meet them where they
Mhm.
are. Having like a little in my office, I have like a calming sensory corner. I call it
Mhm.
sensory corner. Things they can feel, things they can touch in my sensory corner, like stuffies, little fidgets. So, I always tell parents if you have like a little sensory corner, create
Mhm.
that. And then, just give them a moment, have story time with them. And then, just continue to, build those foundational skills and just add on to what I'm doing in my school at home. Just keep
Right.
building those skills. And it takes time. They're still
Mhm.
young because kids
Mhm.
gonna be kids, especially when it comes to the friendships.
Mhm.
Talking about the challenges that you may go through with friendships. Do play dates. Build those skills that you want kind friends. You don't want
Mhm.
friends that's gonna be mean to you. Friends gonna have disagreement. I always tell students. You're gonna have disagreement with friends. That's okay, but you never be disrespectful or
Mhm.
yell at that friend.
Mhm.
Do you know you're going to agree with everything? No. It's okay to advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
Do I have to make you guys be friends? No, I can't make you be friends, but I can make you be respectful to one another.
Right.
And, understanding one another's boundaries. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of key components when parents talk to me about, their students having problem with this. I send resources home where it
Mhm.
mostly be like articles or, stories, or I tell them to go to the school website and go to counseling corner, and I have a counseling website with different
Mhm.
resources as well.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that it seems in your space and an effort that you're making is to build the relationships between the school and the parents. And that just seems so valuable because, as you mentioned, takes a village. And what better way to truly support our kids than at 8 hours they're at school, they're getting love and support and trying to be built into, kind, healthy, respectful human beings, and then to be able to transition those same messages at home. And I know there's so many different ways of parenting and so much information, especially these days, around not wanting our kids to learn certain things and wanting them to learn other things. And I think it's more important now than ever to have these bridges between the school and home where you're having open conversations, you're able to share, the resources that you're talking about, especially when it comes to these like personal development skills, the things that are going to travel with them no matter where they go, no matter what they believe, being able to be respectful, kind, empathetic, understanding, patient. those are things that I don't think many people are arguing over these days. So we can really work together to grow those skills and grow those type of humans.
Yes.
Yeah. So is there one last thing that you want to add in here, Fabian, that's like something, maybe a reminder, maybe a tool or a tip or anything like that that's like can make all the stuff that we talked about today easier when it comes to parenting or teaching young kids?
One, I really don't have much, but the one question I have to say that, as an educator, I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do when it comes to, working with the little kiddos, teaching them the social emotional learning, because I go around teaching lessons to them as well in the classroom. And I understand, as educators could be tough, and I know sometimes for the parents could be tough, but we all here as one, making sure that the students are getting the foundational skills and the academics they need to be successful in life, no matter where they may go off to as they graduate from high school, maybe the workforce, college, or whatever, because this is the generation here, and so we're teaching them foundational skills to help be successful.
Right. Right, man. Well, Fabian, I appreciate that and I appreciate you breaking down everything that you did today, the tips that you shared, the things that you taught me. I just really appreciate the time and the connection. And I know you mentioned you have a school website with the counselor corner. I feel like that would be a great resource if it's open to the public to be able to share. Are there any other like websites or resources that you recommend people take a look at?
If Google's my best friend, and
Mhm.
sometimes I find a lot of resources there or social stories. So if you want to type
Mhm.
in like different topics, like for example, zones of regulation, I have a zones of regulation book that I use a lot of. Sometimes TPT, which that means teacher pay teachers, different
Mhm.
activities on there where I use as well.
Mhm.
And talking about different coping strategies, you could type in different coping strategies and it gets you a list of coping
Right.
strategies and how to manage those coping strategies, how to help those students navigate when they may use a certain coping strategies. And YouTube has some good social stories. Just type in different books and things to help.
Right, right. So it would be like social story on empathy, social story on whole body listening, and then
Yes.
boom, those things populate.
That
Man,
everything will
that's
pop up. You can
yeah,
maybe type in the age range. It could be elementary students or grade K. So, Google has everything.
for sure, for sure. I appreciate that prompt though. Power of the prompt right there, man. So Fabian, once again, thank you for your time and energy, man. And also thank you for the work that you're doing with this younger generation, man, helping them just like get off to a good start in the areas of friendship, social, emotional learning, and development, man. So you're doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.